Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And we are here Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m. And then we're also here on Wednesday mornings, Monday through Friday. And let me rephrase that. Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. following the news right here, where you're going to get 9 different programs, 9 conversations, 9 guests, websites, the whole shooting match as far as the conversations are concerned. And you will, I guarantee you, glean a lot from each one of these programs. We stream live at those times, those 9 times, at richarddugan.com. And that's not all. We podcast these programs on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations, too numerous to mention here. And we are also on YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will subscribe as well as click notification so that you'll be notified the next time a conversation is posted, and you'll be able to tune in and listen in. We ask that you, if you can, support us financially. We would be gratefully appreciative. We have a PayPal account. It's there for your security as well as ours. And they'll ask you for an email address to whom you're sending. Richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email. Richard@richarddugan.com. We also ask that you spend time going within, listening to that still small voice. That's right, in that quiet, peaceful, calm place, and get that guidance and insight that I guarantee you, because I've been listening for decades, it sort of kind of gets a little easier as time goes on, only if you listen to and follow the promptings of the still small voice. I call it my friend. With all that being said, we're here to talk today with a very interesting gentleman, a very special conversation, and it's right up our alley, shall we say. We are going to talk with internationally acclaimed author, speaker, management expert, and marketing consultant, and his name is Bernie Mullins. And Bernie, I want to thank you so much. And do I call you Dr. Bernie Mullins? How are you?
You just call me Bernie, but thank you, Richard. Great to be on, and I appreciate this opportunity.
Well, I am thrilled to have you on because what we are going to talk about today, I think, is it's fascinating from the standpoint of what people can actually do to help, as it is phrased here, help America achieve the American dream. So, and this is not about, if I am correct, this has nothing to do with the acronym MAGA. If my understanding, this is, shall we say, apolitical or non-political, that this has to do with, shall we say, from the Declaration of Independence, has to do with the we the people, correct?
Absolutely correct. Yeah, if you follow Pew Research, they say probably 60% of Americans politically are in the middle. There is the subliminal, in other words, the title Reimagining America's Dream is RAD, R-A-D. And the book, you could say R is Republican, D is Democrat, and A is Americans in the middle. And the book is about the majority of Americans in the middle.
Mm. I'm 64 years of age, born and raised, in this case, in Phoenix, Arizona. And one of the things that came to me some years ago when I started doing these programs, and we were talking about some of these subjects, and a lot of the programs, some upwards of 60,000 programs that I have produced, I haven't hosted them, mind you, at different radio stations. They would talk about the American dream. They would talk about the late early 1900s, Ellis Island. And the phrase that was usually on the lips of many of these people was that they were going to what they referred to as the land of opportunity. And I got to thinking about that in terms of a lot of the complaining, shall we say, by a lot of folks that they felt like they were being cheated, like they were being taken, they were victims. That's kind of where I want to start this. When the reality is that individuals who were born here, are native to this country, have a greater opportunity for taking advantage, shall we say, of the land of opportunity than the immigrants did. And to blame the immigrants for quote unquote taking jobs and this and that and the other thing, that doesn't serve anybody. It actually kind of detracts, in a manner of speaking. Can you talk a little bit about? I almost want to say that dichotomy because, my God, you live in America and you're not taking advantage of those things that were, placed before you. Because even though I'm at the age of 64, I'm only now sort of beginning that process of saying, look, not that I never claimed to be a victim. In fact, I can't stand victimhood. But what I have done is I've said, you know what? I can do more. I want to do more, but I want to do more for others. I want to help others to achieve their goals, their dreams, their heart's desires, and so forth. Talk to us a little bit
Exactly.
about that from your perspective and this particular work that we're talking about today.
Absolutely, Richard. Very much so. I'm English, so I grew up in Europe. I moved to the United States at age 23. I was very fortunate to have a great uncle from Canada who did really, really well, who, emigrated as a young boy, and did well there. And he and his family did so well, they would come back every summer and talk to my Canadian cousins, and they talked about the land of milk and honey, which was North America. I was too young, 6, 7, 8 years old, to know the difference in Canada and the USA. But a couple of years later, when I was 11 or 12, my dad's cousin, who I also called an uncle from New York, was VP for Vicks Pharmaceuticals and came to England to build a factory. And he talked to me about the New York Yankees and the Bronx, where he grew up. And again, the land of opportunity. So at age 21, I came as a summer camp counselor to be a soccer counselor, Camp Takaho in Naples, Maine. I kept on coming back, and eventually the owner of the camp gave me a scholarship to go to grad school, and I went to the University of Kansas and stayed on to do masters and MBA and PhD in business, and I've never left. So the book is about this is my 50th year as an American. Thank you, America. Can't believe you let me in. Really appreciative. Uh, Very, very grateful to all the incredible Americans, particularly those in the heartland. When the first 4 years I was in America, in Kansas, where I fell in love with America, and and just a great opportunity. And so, to the dichotomy question you asked, Richard, we think is a really good question. I know that the people who are converted later in life invariably are more passionate and more committed. So that with my brother-in-law, who I grew up in a Catholic family, and he converted to Catholicism to marry my sister, and was an amazing, amazing Christian who gave to other people. And I don't proselytize about my faith or belief systems or non-belief systems, and certainly don't in the book. It's very, very much a centrist, neutral book.
Mhm.
But people that don't take the opportunity, I think, are their own biggest fools. They're just missing the opportunity. Having grown up in Europe, having built a company in sports marketing and worked in 13 countries around the world, we got warts in America. We got plenty of warts. Exactly what you said. Um, but we're still the greatest country on earth. Um, and when I think back on the 50 years of banks loaning me money as a graduate student, to start a consulting business, and all of the opportunities we get here that may or may not have been there for me in England. Um, Anybody that doesn't take full advantage of this country has missed out on an incredible opportunity. And there is one caveat, and that is, um, being educated, and I took the time to get an undergraduate degree, two masters, and a doctoral degree, and an honorary doctorate degree. Um, so I took the time and invested money in education, which some people may not have the opportunity for. So I understand that there are marginalized people, poor people, many of them in America, that don't get the opportunity. And so the second and tertiary reasons for writing the book, after thank you for letting me in and giving me the American dream for me, my kids, my grandkids. The secondary thing is I think the American dream is aspirational, and I think it should be there for all. And I see it sliding in the 50 years I've lived here.
Mhm.
And then number three, it probably wasn't really there for poor people, uneducated people, marginalized people, people that didn't have parents that empowered them. As I was fortunate to have, in a certain degree, it's English empowerment. It's, you know, there's a caveat there. Don't go above your station. Don't rise too fast up society. That's not a good thing with the stiff upper lip. But aside from that, they certainly did give me that start. And then for my own three kids, I have a fourth son by second marriage, to tell them you can be whatever you want to be in America.
Mhm.
Just work hard, use your initiative in your brains, and give back more than you get.
Mhm.
And we'll get into it more, Richard. But in later life, because I hate politics, I am so apolitical. It's not even funny, and yet I've written a political book because I just couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't stand sitting on the sidelines anymore and watching, the extreme left go further left and the extreme right go further right.
Mhm.
And all of us in the middle, generally sitting on our hands, not screaming out, going, enough already. This toxicity's got to stop.
Yeah.
As you said earlier, the way America is going right now is not self-sustainable. And we're headed for something I don't think any of us want to see.
Well, I would tend to agree with you. None of us want to see it, and yet there are those who don't care. They're more interested in their own self-aggrandizement. It's one of my observation. Bear in mind, my observation is it's the one flaw in capitalism and free enterprise that nobody, even from the standpoint of the one movie that came out some years ago with Michael Douglas, addresses, and that is greed. Now, one of my guests actually said it's not greed, Richard. It's, you people call it greed, but it's not greed. It's envy. That's what it is. It's envy, which is still one of the, what is it? One of the seven deadly sins, if I remember my
Yeah,
Catholic catechism.
yeah,
And I have to tell you, there was a wonderful story that I was told, and it epitomized where we need to come from. And it's actually borne out in a story that Jesus, according to the Bible, that Jesus was talking to his disciples who were worried about where they were, what their next meal was, and what were they going to wear the next day, and where they were going to sleep, and so forth. And he says, "What are you worried about? Look at not only the birds, but look at the lilies of the field, and so on and so forth. Tomorrow will worry about itself." All right. And the story that was shared with me was really kind of cool. At least I thought so. Two gentlemen, Bob and Frank, we'll call them, and they go to breakfast together. They get together every so often, and here they are at breakfast. And Bob, when the bill comes, he reaches into his pocket and pulls out exactly what was needed for the bill plus the gratuity. And of course, they go on their merry way and so forth. They get together for lunch another week or two later, and they have a great conversation, great food, the whole thing. The bill comes, and Bob takes the bill again, reaches into his pocket, pulls out exactly the right amount for the bill. Dinner rolls around a couple weeks later. They get together, same wonderful conversation, great food, atmosphere, the whole shoot and match. The bill comes. Bob reaches into his pocket, exactly the same amount. And Frank says, First of all, Bob, I am very grateful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the fact that, you've picked up the tab, which I was willing to do, but you picked up the tab the last 3 times we went out. I'm just curious. How is it that you have exactly the right amount every single time we go out? He says, well, I'll tell you, Frank, I was cleaning out my garage a few months back, and I came across this dusty old lamp. So I started dusting it off, and suddenly out pops this genie. Says you get one wish, and you can't wish for more wishes. Okay, well, can I get back to you on that? He says, sure, I'll be here. Comes back a couple of days later. I came back a couple of days later, and I said, I know what my wish is, that I would have exactly what I need when I need it. And that's how I have what I need. And yet we in this country, we have people who have millions and billions of dollars, not in assets, but literally in the bank, so to speak. In other words, if they had a credit card with a limit on it, it would be billions, but they would never be borrowing it. It would be theirs. And I know there's the big argument over redistribution of wealth and all that kind of stuff. Oh, and the dirty word of socialism and so forth. But it just seems to me like I came to the observation a few years back that we've seen these television programs, Bernie, of people whose houses may have a tiny little narrow path that you can walk through, and they call them hoarders. Well, what's the difference between those people and the people who have the billions? And what was it? I saw a little video regarding Steve Jobs and his final few words and so forth. But it talked primarily about how he left this earth with, like, I don't know, it was like $7 billion, maybe in assets as well as money. Guess what? In spite of what Steve Martin said back in the 70s on one of his comedy albums, that he was taking it with him, he didn't take it with him. And so I'm just going to throw one other thing in here. I'm going to let you expound, because this to me is some of the most beautiful video I have seen on the internet, on these little shorts and reels like on Facebook. There's a gentleman by the name of Zach, and he goes into a restaurant, says, can I get $1,000 pizza? Let's just say $1,000 pizza. What? Well, okay, how many pizzas can I get for $1,000? And they'll tell him, okay, well, how about give me 100 pizzas, okay? And so well, what are you going to do with 100 pizzas? Well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to give them to the homeless, because they're hungry too. And he says, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll make you the 100 pizzas, but you don't have to pay for them. It's like they jump into the fray of wanting to help others. And he said, okay, well, as soon as I hand these all out, I'm going to come back and give you guys something. So, you don't have to do that. So, no. So they have the video showing him handing out the pieces. And I will tell you that almost every instance, 99.9% of the time, every single person who comes up and takes some of the food, whether it's a pizza or burgers or whatever it is, always says, thank you. Thank you. And he goes back and he gives the restaurant maybe $100, $200, $500, $1,000 in gratitude for their participation. That, to me, is what the American dream is about. And so talk to us about, from your reimagining, shall we say, reimagining the American dream. Talk to us a little bit about those elements that can make us even better than we are, but that can also, those examples that can also break us. And, you can reimagine all you want, but if the reality is that, we're done, the experiment failed, talk to us a little bit about all this.
Yeah, you bet, Richard. Well, there's a couple of different philosophies that I'm going to weave together, and to basically answer the question, which is, it may well be the number one question of the raison d'etre. So let's start with, why the hell are we here? I think that we need to understand and realize we're not here for ourselves. This earth is not about one person living on it. It's other people, and therefore you have to learn to get along. It's the book that we read, 40, 50 years ago, whatever. Everything I needed to learn, I learned in kindergarten.
Mm.
Clean up your own mess. The golden rule.
Hmm.
All of those simple principles. So in the book, I espouse the concept of uh, the stool, the four-legged stool. And I think one thing COVID taught us all is, I've got six grandkids and I'm very blessed. And then the kind of middle ones are now 10 and 8. The late 7-year-old is 8 next week, brother and sister. And they had each other. And my daughter always talks about the experience she had during COVID with the two of them because they had each other, as opposed to friends of my granddaughter, friends of my grandson, who were only children, and what a nightmare it was for the parents. So what's the concept of the four-legged stool? It says that, and we used to run, and I used to teach them work-life balance seminars. Today, we're offering life work balance seminars because of COVID. People don't go into work, people work from home.
Hmm.
People have decided that their life is more important and a higher priority than their work. And part of that is generational with Gen Z, but it's been enhanced and exacerbated by COVID. So work was first, life second. Now life is first, and I'll fit work in. Frightening for me, as a until last May when I sold the company with over 200 employees, that I had a company full of people, young people, who felt that way. But anyway, so number one for me is a higher power, but I realize that that's not for everybody. So basically, it's not about you. It's about something bigger than you. It's about the country. And given that my career was spent in sports and entertainment, it was always the soccer player holding up the badge on the front of the jersey, that it was about the team, it was about the club, it was about my nation. On the plane flight back from Orlando, Florida yesterday, I watched the U.S. national team Brazil game, and it's about something bigger than yourself. Number
Hmm.
one, and I think we've lost that perspective. I think that we've got far too many people that it's all about me. And one of the next books I will write is going to be called the Me Verse, meaning me. I am at the center of the universe, of my own universe. It's all about me and Facebook and all this stuff. And I got a marketing gal in Georgia who, once a month I go out to dinner with her and we touch base on what I needed for marketing support. And she's not an employee, she's an independent contractor. And we could not eat dinner until she'd sorted the whole table of where the food was, where the flowers were, where the lamp was, to take the picture to post on Facebook. I'm like, eat your bloody food. I mean, come on. But God bless her. I mean, she's 50 now. But that's the first thing. So something bigger than you. It's not about you.
Yeah,
And there's plenty of books, whether it's Zig Ziglar, the positive motivational speaker at the
I
beginning of my
remember.
career, who was, you can get whatever you want if you can help other people get what they want. That kind of orientation. Number two is family. And the approach that I write about in the book is F.A.M.I.L.Y. It's a ripoff from Greg Schiano, the football coach at Rutgers University, happens to be one of my company's clients. And it stands for Forget About Me, I Love You. So I'm the patriarch of a family of 16, which is my 4 kids, their partners, my 6 grandkids, and my spouse. And my job is to make their life better, help them, guide them and not give them answers, but the show them how to fish approach so they can be self-sustainable, but show them what life's all about, which is about other people. And in our family of the Morgan Mullins, the 16 of us, here's what life's all about, and responsible as a granddad to teach my kids and my grandkids how to be focused on other people and not be members of the meverse. And finally, the fourth, so we've got, other-centered, something bigger than you, higher power if that's your gig. If not, recognize you're part of the United States, you're part of the world. There's a bigger responsibility. Family, it's all about family, supporting each other, helping each other, guiding each other. And there are certain ethnic cultures that have traditionally, through time, done an incredible job of being focused on their own communities, and there are plenty of great examples. But I have benefited from working. I came to the United States through Jewish summer camps. Most of the owners of the professional sports teams and leagues I've worked for have been Jewish, and they've done a phenomenal job of taking care of their own. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Third, vocation. What's your vocation? What's your purpose in life? For me, I've been a teacher, a mentor, a coach, an educator, 10 years as a professor at UMass in Amherst, Massachusetts. Then my career in pro sports, baseball, hockey, collegiate athletics, NBA teams, NHL teams, all of that. So what's your career? And today's young people want to get into working with a company that they feel good about the product and service that that company produces, that they offer it as a fair price with high honesty and integrity, and that they give back. And the fourth leg of the stool is the community. What have you done in your community every day? And the problem, I think, is too many people become, the world's crazy. I don't want to be part of the world. America's crazy. The world's crazy. The woke are too far left. The MAGAs are too far right. They're all nuts. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand that perspective. And my solution is, live in a bubble. Live in a bubble, but don't forget the other people. But the bubble is your community.
Mm.
Bubble is not you, and it's not just your immediate family.
Yes,
it's your community, and that's where creating the Aspire Difference Foundation, where all proceeds from all my consulting that I do and the book go back to single parents with preschool kids. Why that? Why single parents? I was a single parent in 1988. I can assure you, Richard, and to your listeners, that there was hardly another guy in the country who got custody of his kids in 1988. Every judge gave it to the mother.
Mm-hmm.
My ex-wife didn't want to be a mom at that time in her life. She's since come back for the kids, which is awesome. But at that time, she didn't. And so I got them. And they were 13, 11, and 8. And I was terrified. So, whether it's a teenage pregnant single parent or a 35-year-old single parent, they need more money, they need more support.
Mm-hmm.
And the education of a child preschool is so important. And so one of the recommendations in the book is we have universal free preschool, quality preschool for every American child, every state. It's what we absolutely need, with the goal of the Aspire Difference Foundation is that those children go into kindergarten able to read, write, and write basic sentences and do basic math, and be socialized for success, to take instruction from a teacher and to get along well with their peers. It's an awfully long answer to your question, but it's work-life balance has become life-work balance. How do you have a balanced life? You got 4 legs on your stool minimum. You've got recognition of a higher power, that it's about other people, not just you. You've family focused. You have a career, a vocation, and you work to make your community a better place to live and work.
I think one of the elements of work too is the fact that, and I thought about this in 2008, 2009, when hundreds of thousands of people lost their jobs. And the first thought went through my mind was, I wonder how many of those people, and I'll bet you it's in the 90 percentile, hated their jobs. And even though they're now unemployed, they're happy to be unemployed because they're not working in that snake pit, if you will. Okay. And then shortly thereafter, the entrepreneurial explosion happened, and
Yeah.
people started to find things that they enjoyed doing. Two, unfortunately, I think the criticism of business and media. And it's like, wait a minute. Why is it that you get to decide what I am going to do with the rest of my life? My father, my late father, told me many years ago, Richard, you need to find something you love doing because you're going to be doing it for a long time. He also added, don't get stuck like me. Well, my father didn't stay stuck. He went back to school, junior college, got his computer programming degree in the 70s when they had punch cards and fanfold paper,
Remember
and
well.
he moved on from there. As a matter of fact, to the extent that in the 90s, in the mid 90s, when computers started to become personal computers at home, I learned how to build them, primarily because as a kid growing up, I used to build models. And this was a working model. And I wish I could do it today, but unfortunately, the way that the modern 21st century 2020 decade computers are built doesn't work that way anymore. Now you can still buy a tower and you can buy a motherboard and you can buy the peripherals and all that stuff, but you know it's not the same. But I had a blast. And as
Yeah.
far as the career I've been in for the last 45 years, I've been in it for almost the entire time. I worked for about a year in a warehouse. That was a whole lot of fun, but I learned a lot. I met a lot of people. Um, but the bottom line to address what you just said is that I am only here talking to you right now, Bernie Mullins, who is our guest here on the program, because of thousands of people, not the least of which are my mother and father. And I love the biological explanations on some of these videos on YouTube and so forth. Out of the millions of sperm, I made it. So the odds of all of that happening, I'm sure Vegas can place odds on all of that, are incredible. And yet here we are, you and I, not to mention the choices that I have made, even as a child, turning left rather than turning right on that given day. If I'd gone
Yeah.
left, I would have been hit by a car and killed. Over. Their life is over. But I turned right instead, and I never even knew that was a problem. And the list goes on. So I find it really incomprehensible when, and I think it was back in that latter early part of the the 20s, 2000s, the 8, 9, 10. They were doing a news piece on businesses in Texas, entrepreneurial businesses, and almost to an individual who was interviewed, each one of them said, "I did this I did this all by myself," and I just had to sit there going, "You are out of your mind. You don't have a
No way.
clue as to who is responsible for why you're doing what you're doing. Yes, you made the choice to go in this direction, but if it weren't for the manufacturers who made the products and or service materials to provide the service that you're providing, if they hadn't made them, and then the customers who chose to buy your product or service, you're beholden to all of these people, you know? Um,
Oh, it's so funny to comment on, to hitchhike on what you said, Richard. I remember I was probably 11 years old. We were looking to move, and we went in, looked at a bunch of houses, and we went into this incredible house. and the owner who was selling the house said something like, "Well, I'm a self-made man." And we get out into the car. My dad goes, "Well, we're not buying that house out of principle because he's full of you know what,
Yeah.
because there's nobody's a self-made man. God made us all." And that idea, you know, and that mentality is starting to, I think, creep and get wider, and it's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Um, it's disappointing to a degree because somehow, some way along the way, they were raised with that ideal in idea
Yeah.
in mind. And it's completely contrary to the mathematics of it, to the physics of it. It's not even in this reality,
No, I was
because
just going
I
to
mean,
say the
even if
word
you want,
reality.
yeah, even if you do accept the concept, as we certainly do here, of a higher power, God, creator, what have you, you didn't do it on your own. How did, it's like, okay, if
No.
you were a self-made man, how did you get here?
Yeah.
How did you get here? That's would be the question. We're talking
Yeah.
today here on our program, and again, we're keeping this apolitical, and it's hard to stay away from that conversation only because of a lot of the garbage that's going on today. It's just absolutely astounding, some of the perspectives that are out there. It's like I was saying, and again, I only make this reference only because it just comes up. Anyway, our guest, Dr. Bernie Muller. Um, it was actually, I still remember the exact date too, June 15th, 2015. Now, I myself, in the early 80s, I went through several personal growth programs like LifeSpring. And at that time, we were dealing with the issue of victimhood. It's your parents' fault that you're the way you are. It's somebody else's fault. Da da da. They programmed you. They did this. They did that. They did the other. Then later on in the 80s, we kind of shifted over into codependency. In the 90s, we started shifting out of that into interdependency, realizing, oh, we're all connected. We're all impacted by one another, and we impact one another. But then on June, and not to say that it wasn't there before this, but on June 15th, 2015, the the whole victimhood story came roaring back. And I have refused. I said, no, I've already played that game. It's not fun. It takes too much energy and it doesn't accomplish anything. And a lot of people, think, well, yes, but this person, when they were in that office for so many years, they did this and I says, you don't understand. You're not hearing me. I knew from the 15th of June 2015, I didn't want this person hired for this position. It had nothing to do with what he was going to do or even what he has done. And I've even asked business leaders, take the name out of the equation. Would you hire a person who exhibited the traits that this person exhibits? Oh, no, of course not. Then why are you hiring them to do this job? I don't understand. That's the real crux that I have a problem with. And that is that people are looking for something to do. You can call it a job or mine's a vocation. I mean, I love doing this. I hope to live to be over 100 and still doing this. I wish that I could have played baseball. By the way, I'm so thrilled about the fact that you were in the sports realm, as it were. I loved, I have to say past tense. I loved baseball. They have ruined, it isn't baseball. I don't know what the hell it is they're playing out there. What a clock? The game is as long, if you love the game, if you're a diehard baseball fan, it's as long as it is. You know, football has a clock, let them keep it. Basketball
Young
has a
people
clock.
today don't, yeah, they don't have the patience, Richard.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
just don't have the patience. The idea of an indefinite game, I've sat through 23 inning games when I was with the Pittsburgh
Yes.
Pirates.
Yeah.
You know, it's a reflection. There's a lot of reflections. My sport growing up in England, the sport that brought me to the USA is soccer, football, my football, world football. And they've got the offside rule, they've got VAR, video assisted referees, they can't get it right. They've just made it worse. You don't celebrate when your team scores a goal anymore. You look at the linesman, you look and go, was he onside? Was he offside? Did he handle the ball? And it's again, it's a very, very different world.
Yeah.
And going back to your point about how do we get people to accept responsibility and consequences for their actions?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, the story I always told to my employees and people that I taught at university was being a small boy. We lived on the major highway that fed the port of Liverpool. Trucks, huge tractor trailer trucks, very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
There was a service road to the houses, and I lived in income subsidized housing, nice income subsidized housing, duplexes, brick houses. I had a mom and dad, so I didn't exactly grow up in the hood, but I didn't exactly grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth either. But we had a big, wide sidewalk in front of the houses, flagstones, as we call them, and we played games. All the kids in the neighborhood played games. And as soon as the kids got loud and noisy, my mother's would come out the front door and it would be the famous finger, the curling finger. Bernard. It was Bernard. Bernard, come back in the house. My kids are not going to be out there when the neighbors are complaining about the noise. Okay. And I can remember saying, well, it was Monica, I'm pointing the finger at Monica. And my mother, I must have been 7 or 8 years old. She looked at my hand and says, look at your hand. While you're pointing one finger at Monica, there's three pointing back at you. And
Mm.
don't you ever forget that lesson.
Mm.
So I've
Yeah.
always built companies, been CEO, been senior VP with the approach of responsibility that anything went wrong. There was probably three things that I did that created it going wrong compared to the one thing of anybody else. So
Mm.
again, that's the kind of attitude and approach we have to
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
And it's not what we've got right now going on in America. We've
Well,
got
there were
far too
two.
many people
Yeah. Well, there
pointing
were
the
two
finger.
high profile trials that have both ended in convictions. Okay.
Yes.
Guilty. Only one of them has acknowledged, and he's acknowledged throughout before even the trial began. Yeah, I did this. I did that. I did the other thing that, probably led to this. Of course, I have to then question, well, why did you go to trial? Well, I have a feeling that he knew what the outcome was going to be, needed to show the public. This is what someone does when they have done wrong, when they have crossed the line. They take responsibility for their actions. And I love how people are parsing apart the other one, where the individual refuses. So I'm an innocent man. I'm an innocent man. And it's like, okay, well, all right, doing what you did, comparing that to, let's say, Bill Clinton and so forth. Yeah, the difference is, like Nixon, you tried to hide it. And that's why Nixon resigned. They were about to impeach him too, from what I understand. It was an
Sure.
amazing
Yeah.
thing.
It was the cover up. It
Yeah,
wasn't the act. It was the cover up.
that's
And it
it.
was,
Yeah.
the story I've told to my kids and grandkids, Richard, is I was 6 years old and definitely influenced by a neighbor who was 7, almost 8. And conversation. I initiated the conversation. We were hungry. Well, my aunt just around the corner has a couple of apple trees in her backyard. I know how to climb over the gate and open the gate, and we go in there and have some apples. So sure enough, Malcolm and I did that. And so we'll go back home later on that afternoon. I'm in the kitchen, fortunately a stone floor, and I throw up a whole bunch of apples.
Uh-oh.
My mother goes, where do you get the apples? Well, and my Aunt Anne's backyard were baking apples, not eating apples.
Uh-oh.
So you had to cook them to soften them so they were tender and you could eat them. So that's why I threw them up.
Hmm.
So in that process, I, you know, told a lie. I mean, I came up with some BS story as to where the apples came from, and eventually I fessed up. They were Auntie Anne's apples, and then I blamed Malcolm Reed, my neighbor, because he was older, as the one who influenced me when it was my act. And so, well, wait till your dad gets home. And of course, dad gets home and takes his belt off and goes, "Here's 2 whacks for stealing apples. Here's 3 whacks for lying, and here's 3 whacks on your bum for blaming Malcolm Reed."
Mm. Mm.
You know, and so and dad never hit me out of anger. Of course, today he would have been arrested for child abuse as opposed to tough love, which is what it was.
Yeah.
But he explained to me before each whack what I was getting it for, and made sure that I knew, that there were consequences for my actions and that they were exacerbated by not telling the truth and pointing the finger at someone else,
Mm.
and I should pay the consequences.
Yeah.
And fair enough. And so here I am today. I would never
Yeah.
think about using corporal punishment on my kids today, although I did particularly on my son, but probably deserved a little bit of it back in those days, but certainly wouldn't think about it with the grandkids today because
Yeah.
it's a different world.
It is. It is a different world. I am grateful for the childhood that I had. There are times I wish I could go back to that childhood because it was so much fun. I mean, we
Oh
had the
yeah.
run of the neighborhood, and the parents and the families, they did not have a problem because we knew that as it got darker and darker, we need to wrap things up and head home, even if it was playing
Yeah.
tag or hide and seek or whatever it was, or kickball in the front yard, to my father's consternation. My father kept an immaculate green Bermuda grass lawn in the spring, summer, and fall. Absolutely fantastic. And it was great on the feet too. I got to tell you, it felt so good.
Oh
But
yeah.
you brought to mind what happened to me. I was a paper boy, and for whatever reason, I can't even remember why we were at the location where the papers were dropped off. And where we got the little oranges, I do not know, but we were throwing them up against a building across the street from us. Now, granted, my orange did not break the window. The other guy's orange did. I was just as culpable because I was throwing oranges at the building, which we shouldn't have been
Hmm.
doing in the first place. And we both ended up taking responsibility, and I think we had to pay for the repair of the window and so forth.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely different times. And that's another thing that I want to talk a little bit about in regards to your book, Reimagining America's Dream, making it attainable for all. My guest today is Bernie Mullin, Dr. Bernie Mullin, and BernieJMullin.com is the website. We encourage you to go there. We will be linked to that website, Bernie, so that people can click on it and go there, find out more about you as well. Two things. Number one, regarding baseball, I never thought I would ever come from a town that would not only ever have a Major League Baseball team, but have a Major League Baseball team that actually won the World Series. So I'm glad that they won it when baseball was baseball back in 2001. The D-backs, the Diamondbacks play in a ballpark that will always be known to me originally as the
Bob.
Bob. Yeah, yeah. Bank One Ballpark.
Bank
I
one
don't
ball.
care who owns it; it's still the Bob. And I got to do something for my father that usually the father does for the son. But my dad was not a real big baseball fan. He was more into the Phoenix Suns and, of course, Arizona State University football. I took him to 2 baseball games
Oh,
at the
wonderful.
Bob. And one of them, we were up in the nosebleed section. There was nobody around us. We were up in the nosebleed section. He and I both had low vision at the time. So we went down to TGI Fridays, which was a restaurant in the outfield, and watched the game on the TV screens and had a little something to eat and had a wonderful talk. And it was really kind of cool. And I will always cherish those memories. But the other aspect of the reimagining America's dream, um, do you know when that term uh, started being used and what it meant, the American dream?
Yes. Yeah, I cite it in the book. It was created in about 1937, I believe. I apologize, but anybody can Google and find out the gentleman that came up with the concept.
Hmm.
And basically, it was the American dream was the land of opportunity, without a shadow of a doubt. It was manifest for a lot of people with their own home, their own property, but it was to be gained, and this is one of the central tenets in the book. It was to be gained through hard work first, innovation or ingenuity, um, and really adding value um, beyond what you got paid in wages.
Hmm.
So that was the original concept, and it was certainly not to be given to you. It certainly wasn't walk across or somehow find your way across the southern border to the United States, um, get a court hearing date in 2026, and amazingly enough, according to INS, the stats are that almost 80% of the people are actually coming back for their court date because I guess they want to be documented, they want to be legal, and able to, and not have to hide, for the rest of their life or have children
Hmm.
who hide.
Yeah.
So, but the main tenet of the book is it's the four letters of EARN. You got to earn it. I forget who it was, but there used to be a commercial, and there was that great British actor who did the Kingsfield character from Harvard Law School in the paper
John
chase,
Houseman.
John Houseman, and
Yeah.
he goes, "They did it the old-fashioned way. They
They
earned it."
earned it. Yes, yes.
Yeah, and I mean, it's real simple. You started to get into this before, Richard. It's so funny because here I am, I'm 75, and my wife knows she's a green thumb. She loves gardening and everything else. I'm like, it's great that you love it, honey. Go do it.
Hmm.
Because at age 8, 9, and 10, I had to do all the gardening, my house. My dad spent the weekend doing all the paperwork. He sold life insurance, put all that stuff together. He was a huge horse racing fan. He'd watched horse races. And I was taught, if not multiple things, but the two biggest principles as a child growing up were elbow grease, which was hard work, and the other one was your word is your bond, honesty
Hmm.
and integrity.
Hmm.
And they are two of the greatest gifts that my father could ever give me, amongst the others. But the love of the soccer team that I have, English Premier League team that fights relegation every year right now, but hopefully we'll get better. But hard work and honesty and integrity, and that's what's inherent in the book. Is let's give everybody the chance to achieve the dream, which could be home ownership, or it could be create generational wealth that you can pass on to your kids. Um, but a better life for your kids. And we're looking at the current generation of kids. So anybody under 30, possibly making less money than their parents, possibly having less um, material assets, that a lot of people focus the American dream around that. Whereas to me, it's not that. It's exactly what you said before. It's do what you love and you'll love what you do.
Hmm.
It's the quality of life, the kind of life that what does it mean to be an American? You're free. And
Hmm.
if you don't think you're free, go live in some of these other countries and see how free you are. Go live in Iran,
Yeah.
or without, again, we want to stay away from politics, but those young college student women who occupied college campuses in the last couple of months
Yeah.
and said, I am Hamas, you know uh, go
Mm-hmm.
live in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
you know um, Look at the videotapes of what happened on October 6th.
Hmm. Yeah.
Freedom was not. Freedom was not a value demonstrated that day.
Yeah. Well, in reference,
So
yeah, I was just going to say, in reference to the American dream, another element too, and this is kind of what we talked about earlier as well. Back during the campaign, presidential campaign of 1980, there was a question that was asked. And the question that was asked was, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Obviously, that was Ronald Reagan who asked that question. And over the years, I've thought about that question and I've come to this. This is the answer I would give. You had nothing to do with whether I am or am not better off today than I was 4 years ago. You had absolutely nothing to do with it. Ergo, if you're trying to sway me to vote for you, you failed. It is my responsibility. If I'm worse off today than I was 4 years ago, that's on me. Okay. I'm not giving you credit or blame. It's my responsibility. And that's kind of what this all goes back to,
correct.
is that aspect of taking responsibility for your life, which is what we talk about on this program. We encourage people all the time to go out and find out what their life's purpose is all about. You know, the hundreds of thousands that lost their jobs back in 2008-9, um, they were probably, most of them were probably doing jobs that, you talked about generational wealth. Well, there's probably generational careers. They just passed it down from one generation to the next. If you love farming, that's great. And that the farm has been in your family for 4, 5, 6 generations. I applaud that. But is that really what you want to do? And of course, the family usually tends to guilt the individual into
Oh yeah.
doing that rather than pursuing their dream. Do you feel that you have done that in your life, that you have pursued? Because I know dreams change over time, but that you have pursued and been able to follow your dreams?
Absolutely, Richard. And that wasn't the intent. I came initially to get a master's in marketing with the plan to go back to work for a metal tubing company that I was working for in England.
Mm.
And they actually held my job. I was a manager, and a year out of college, I got a manager's job. I mean, it's interesting when you think about it. The managing director, CEO of the company, had got a Harvard MBA, a wonderful guy, great guy, very inspirational. And I'd learned later there was 250 people applied for the job. There was 10 on a short list that they interviewed, and I got the job. And I got the job because it was marketing manager
Hmm.
for a metal tubing company, the specialty metal tubing. I mean, very, very corrosive resistant for petrochemical plants, for ships, also aluminum tubing for airplanes. Um, and I got the job because when they asked me, they said, "You actually have not been in a sales position before in your career, and now you'd be the chief salesperson of this company. What makes you think you can do it?" And I said, "I believe that life is about building relationships and connections first and foremost. I would sell myself first. And once I'd built that connection, I would then sell them on my company, Circ Metal Tubes, being the best in our business." And I got the job.
Mm.
And so when you think about it, I came to get a master's degree and go back. But my ex-wife, who was English, mother of my three kids, absolutely loved America. We fell in love with the heartland of Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas, and Kansas City, and we wanted to stay. And so I had no idea. And it's my career is more like the family circus. If you remember that cartoon that was on the back of the beautiful cartoon section in every Sunday newspaper, where the kids would go and there'd be little dots, dotted lines, and they go around in circles. They go from A to Z via F, G, and then back to B, and all over the place. So I was 10 years a university professor. I then went into baseball with the Pirates, then with the Rockies, minor league hockey in Denver, to run the sports side of the business, so I could be a GM, be a CEO, and then NCAA athletics, University of Denver, taking it from Division II to Division I, and then the NBA, where I was chief marketing officer for David Stern, and then CEO of the Atlanta Hawks, Atlanta Thrashers NHL team, and Phillips Arena. And then the last 16 years of building my own business. And, was every step a logical, sequential step? No, it wasn't. But the move to creating my own business, funnily enough, you mentioned it several times, Richard, 2008 is when I started the Aspire Sport Marketing Group in the middle of the worst economic crisis that we in our generation has known in America and across most of the world. Started a business. Took no salary for the first couple of years to make it profitable, to be able to get the loans and the factoring that needed to become a ticket and donation marketing company for colleges and pro sports. We generated in 16 years 1.75 billion in new and incremental revenue for our 300 clients, and modeled it after what did Gen Z and the young people want. Are you giving a good product? Yeah, the best in the industry. Is it fairly priced? Yes. Is it high integrity? Yes. And what did we do back in the communities? Initially, we started with the unhoused. We actually did a program for young people in Atlanta, Georgia, where there's 4,000 young people sleeping on the streets every night. We put a soccer program together to give them some purpose, so that Friday afternoons they would practice and play games, and after a period of time they stopped drinking or doing drugs, even though they were 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 the night before the game. But they didn't want to let their teammates down, and it took them one step closer to wanting to go into a halfway house to actually get off the streets. And we chose teenage people living on the streets because they had a much greater probability their lives could be turned around, as opposed to in Atlanta, Georgia, at that time, 80% of all the homeless community in Atlanta, Georgia, were veterans. They were overwhelmingly Black men. They were overwhelmingly PTSD, and they were overwhelmingly very unlikely to ever go back to being housed. So, that to me is the philosophy. And the book Reimagining America's Dream chronicles the 50 years of my life in America, living in every 3 out of the 4 time zones, and then spending almost 2 years working with the Dodgers as a consultant, going into LA for 2 weeks every month. So I've lived in all 4 time zones, hating politics, and obviously the first political election was Jimmy Carter, and his loss obviously to Ronald Reagan, and that whole interesting scenario of the Iran hostage crisis and America feeling neutered and not in control, to slowly and surely becoming more and more politically aware, more and more socially conscious of the people that didn't have the chance to achieve the American dream, and more of the social warts. And so, the research is based on Pew Research. What are the top 10 issues that Americans vote on, in presidential elections, and how to solve them? And number one is the income and the income gap and the uneven distribution of income, and the ability to create generational wealth so that our offsprings can have a better life going forward. And then number two, the driver of so much of that is our system funds schools by by the marketplace, by the district in which they're in. And poorer school districts have less revenue for schools, therefore probably not as good teachers, not able to pay teachers to retain people, particularly when you're in these tough schools. And one of my son-in-laws is a middle school teacher in one of the worst school districts in Denver, Colorado.
Mm.
And what these kids don't have in their lives is unbelievable. It's all the things we've talked about. There are invariably aren't two parents in the house. There's only one, invariably single parent mom. They live in very poor areas where the gangs and the influences out in the street are very, very high. Many of them feel they have to have a weapon, a gun, to stay alive. They see lots of their friends and their relatives die. They see drug addiction. They see crime as a solution, because they haven't been challenged and excited. And put them in that kindergarten class at age 5. You might as well have dumped an American child in a school in Beijing, China, where all they're talking in is Mandarin, because it's a foreign language. I don't know math. I don't know the alphabet. I don't read. I don't go home to a house where mom sits and puts me on the lap and reads, what's this letter? What does that word mean? It's such a massive disadvantage that we can't sit by and allow to be perpetuated.
Yeah. Well, I know that there are those who will, often said, and I know I guess it was one of the founding fathers who made the comment in regards to education that you needed an educated electorate. Well, the problem is that our educational systems have been. This was the allegation back in the 70s, early 80s, and I thought, and I did the math on this one. I'm going, okay, you're telling me that the quality of the textbooks, the history in particular, and so forth, they're not real good. Okay. And so you're teaching the future adults of America from these, as you claim, inferior textbooks. Well, they're going to go into the production of textbooks as they get older, and they're going to create even more inferior textbooks that will be shared with the children who will become the next generation of textbook editors. And so the quality of textbooks will continue to decline. And it's like, then this is it's not sustainable. So why aren't we fixing that? I remember as a kid growing up learning about Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Then when we were celebrating the 500th anniversary thereof, I was working for a Christian radio station, and I was getting 3 different versions of the history of Christopher Columbus. One of them, he was a saint. The other one, he was a devil. And the other one, he was somewhere in the middle. I'd lean more towards the one in the middle. But I thought, wow, okay, well, this was 500 years ago. How has the history changed? What is it that we have left out that we haven't been looking at? And then, of course, here we are in the 21st century, and we have, by the way, I love this question I saw in one of these videos, the question of critical race theory, for example, in our educational system. Could you show me a math problem from the critical race theory? It's like, and I started to think about that, thinking, how is that part of that curriculum? But I've also talked with teachers who teach this curriculum, and they say it is not about teaching people to hate America. It's about teaching people about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Though you mentioned the warts as well as the shining silver or gold, paved streets and so forth. It's telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And it just seems like there are those in this country who don't want to look at the warts. They don't want to show. As a matter of fact, someone shared with me just the other day, and they're a student of the history. The founding, according to this individual who shared this with me, said the founding fathers, despite all of their efforts with the Constitution and all of the different other documents, They didn't think that this was going to last more than 10, 15, maybe 20 years tops. And yet we're
Yeah, it was
here
an
almost.
experiment.
It was exactly. So I just, I think that it's a mistake to go through the process of trying to rewrite history, in terms of making the founding fathers out to be such villains, because they may have owned slaves. That's what you did back in the 1700s. You owned slaves. I mean, just like it's what you did, you wore those white powdered wigs, no matter how stupid it was in the middle of summer to wear one of those things, and all of that clothing that they wore. That's what you did. That was this, unfortunately, it was the style.
Yeah, well,
It,
The English wore redcoats in the woods, so they were
that
relatively easy to pick out.
if they'd had neon orange, I bet you they would have been wearing that too. It's like, okay, we can see you real well. You don't seem to understand the whole aspect of camouflage. But
No, they
it's
didn't.
just it's real interesting how we seem to lose sight of what is really important. And to me, one of the most important things that you're sharing with us here today is that it's up to each one of us to determine the outcome of our lives. We talk about choices and knowledge of those choices. I talk about how important education is, and not just formal education. Um, and that I learned this especially early on in my career. You work with what you have until you get what you want, and that there is always a workaround,
Yeah,
without exception. It
there
just
is.
depends upon how long you're willing to research it.
Yeah, yeah, very much
Yeah.
so. And in the book, you touched on education as being so vitally important, the key to
Mm-hmm.
unlocking the American dream, the key to unlocking, I think, happiness for a lot of people. So really, the American dream should be about living the life ideally you want to live, knowing that you're only going to get that if you work hard to earn it. But starting with education, the prescription is, and it's all costed out, and it doesn't cost any more than the check we've just written to Israel and the Palestinians and to the Ukrainians.
Mm-hmm.
It's 100 billion uh, gets this. And so the idea is, you know, invest in our youth, free preschool education nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
So you think about a single parent mom, she's going to get national minimum wage, $30,000 a year to start with, more than whatever she's making right now.
Mm-hmm.
She can work one job. She can be at home to teach the kids, nurture the kids. Uh, Through the program I'll talk about in a second, um, as a young American, they would learn how to cook good, healthy stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and not always go to a food desert to get everything out of a can. So 5 years preschool, the goal being that child goes into kindergarten able to read, write, make basic sentences, do basic math, be socialized for success. That can be done in all the way through grade school and middle school. No latchkey kids. You have babysitting paid for in the school, where they would encourage the kids to do their homework, before they put them on a late bus to go home. So they're not going home to an empty house or to low quality babysitting.
Mm-hmm.
Then prior to the freshman year in high school, 8 week sleepaway camp that you get paid for. And it's how to be an adult, how to be an American citizen.
Mm-hmm.
What it's John F. Kennedy's not what my country can do for me, but what I can do for it.
Mm-hmm.
Learn what it means to be an adult. Learn what it means to be with rich, poor, and in the middle. Learn what it means to be with black, yellow, brown, doesn't matter. Everybody in there together, 1,000 kids in a camp. Every other day, you have to prep a meal. At the
Yeah.
end of it, you get recipes for 8 breakfasts, 8 lunches, 8 dinners that are healthy, that you know how to cook. I mean,
Mhm.
learn to accept responsibility for your own actions. Learn that it is in your hands to do what you want to do. Then before the sophomore, junior, and senior year, you work once in a business, once in a government agency, once in a charity or whatever. You've got a resume at age 18. You've had 4 years of summer work. You would have been paid a minimum of 20,000 bucks. We'll go get banks, and I've done sponsorships all my life. I know the banks will come after this like big time. You go get banks to give these kids 7.5% interest if they leave the money in there. And I realize some of the poorer households won't be able to leave the money in there. So by the time you're 18, you would have 25,000 cash
Mm.
in your bank account.
Hmm.
There's generational wealth in one generation,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
I mean, and then so what do you do? The kid can fund his own entrepreneurial or her own entrepreneurial business.
Right.
They can go get an apartment. Then if you've done that during high school, if you've done the high school work program in good faith, then you get free $15,000 a year, and the value goes up every year for cost of living
Mm.
to go to college. You get $60,000 off your college bill or off your professional certification. You want to be a beautician, you want to be a plumber. And even having been a professor for 10 years, I'd have a hard time taking a young person today, and a young man living up in the mountains where I have a home, not wanting to be a plumber, an HVAC engineer, electrician, or whatever. Go work for the biggest electrical firm in the mountains for 5 years, learn everything you can, then go start your own business.
Mm.
You'll be worth millions in a few years. We can't get enough electricians and plumbers and HVAC engineers and people to do the common building trades.
Yeah.
So that's the heart of it, to change the complexion of the low funding. And then there's increased funding for teachers, because I think it's probably the toughest profession there is. There's increased funding for every school, so the spend per student is not based upon the local tax base in poorer districts. It's based upon a federal minimum. And all of this is costed, like I said, for less than the check we've given to Ukraine, that we're giving to Israel, we're giving to the Palestinians.
Mm.
And I'm completely anti-war,
Hmm.
but I'm not anti-strong military. We have to have a strong military. And last comment I'll say, Richard, I learned something about 4 years ago. I was doing some work with the Canadian Soccer League in Toronto, got on a plane to fly back to Denver, and sat next to a member of parliament for the Canadian Parliament. And I said, I'm
Mm.
sick and tired. He was one of Trudeau's liberals. I said, I'm sick and tired of America having to be the world cop.
Mm.
And he said to me, they're always going to have to be the world cop. I'm
Mm.
like, oh my God, why do you say that? And he said, who the hell else is going to do it? He said, you leave a vacuum, you got China or Russia will try and fill it, which is
Yeah.
what they're doing right now,
Hmm.
we because we're weak,
Hmm. Yeah.
in world politics compared to at times we've had great strength. There's nobody doing what Reagan did, saying, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I know Biden's trying to get a ceasefire and peace, but we're not doing it from a position of strength. And that concerns me as well, because we can't exist just in America. We see what happened with COVID, the origins of which you can believe whatever you want, but
Yeah.
they definitely came from overseas for sure.
Hmm.
China almost certainly.
Hmm.
You know, uh, you can't exist on your own. We're a world economy, and we have to be a world power, and we have to take that responsibility for keeping the world democratic
Yeah.
and in peace, whether we like it or not.
Yeah. I think one of the couple of things that of a positive nature that came out of that period, the last three years, or previous 3 years, 2020 to 23, was number one, the conversation that we weren't having about our mental health and wellness in this country. That's number
Yeah,
one. Number two is, and this was my observation, when they chose to shut the country down, and I think it was St. Patrick's Day, the 17th, which was a work anniversary for me. I had started at the station I'm at full time on St. Patty's Day in 2008. Anyway, I had been advocating this since I was a late teenager and getting into this career in the early 70s. When the influenza starts to move across the country, across the world, as it does every year, shut down the airlines. Just shut it 2 weeks, just 2 weeks, shut them down. Don't let people move around. It's not that you have to stay at home. You don't. You want to drive, go ahead, drive. Shut down. I mean, because they're petri tubes is what they are.
Yeah, they are.
Shut them down for 2 weeks. And of course, the argument that I had heard was, oh, do you know what that'll do to the economy? And I can now point to 2020 and say, we survived,
Exactly.
didn't we? And they were shut down for a lot longer than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because then you stop the spread. Because my question is to the statisticians, when the influenza starts to spread across this country and people choose to go into work and infect everybody else, and then everybody else starts to get sick, what, on a scale of 1 to 10, where does the productivity go in that company? And then in the companies across the country. And then, of course, you have the people who call in sick, who can't come in because they're just too ill to work. So what happens to the productivity then? So if you're concerned about the bottom line and productivity, then you need to do something different. And that's what I saw. We did, whether you liked it or not, and even though we did not know what the other end of it was going to look like, at least we did something different. Using Einstein's definition of insanity, if we'd left everything open, we knew what we were going to get, and we lost 1 million human beings in this country alone through that process. And some of them, and I remember this study in New York City with the trucks, the morgue trucks. They did a search of those people who died, and 90% of them died not from the virus, but from the underlying conditions that they had. So our health in this country is suspect. We don't even have the physical strength of immune systems to fight off most anything, because everybody's got diabetes, they've got high blood pressure, they've got this, they've got that, they've got the other thing. And so it was like, this was a dream world for a virus like Corona. But
it was.
The reality that I saw was that then there may be some other benefits, entrepreneurial. Look how many people stepped up early on to provide the protective wear for the first responders.
Yeah.
I mean, it exploded because these people gave a damn about the general public. Doesn't it say in the Declaration of Independence, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, promote the general welfare, and then preserve the blessings of liberty to ourselves and who? Our posterity. Well, people were screaming about their First Amendment rights being violated, and I would say no one ever usurped or squashed my First Amendment rights. I exercised them by putting on a mask, by washing my hands, by staying 6 feet apart, and taking responsibility. Now, I did catch it once, and it really ticked me off because it meant I couldn't go anywhere. But I showed no symptoms. And once I tested positive, okay, or negative rather, negative. All right, I can move around the country freely. I think there were a lot more positives than negatives. And so when we do something different in our lives, and you did that, and see, that's the thing I love about your life story thus far, is the diversity of careers that you had. And I know you say that there was no real path or what have you through them, that kind of tied
Wasn't a
you all together.
defined path.
Yeah,
Yeah.
divine path. But by the same token, and I've had a few different careers outside of broadcasting, but I learned myself, and you probably picked up on this as you kind of reviewed in your past. There were certain things that you learned in each one of those careers, in each one of those jobs, that you actually were able to take forward into the next one, into the next one, into the next one, right?
Oh, wow, without a doubt. Yeah, I mean, I've learned, I started out in some of the original drafts before I wised up and got a ghostwriter who was, an award-winning ghostwriter, and obviously he made the process pretty easy. It took us about a year of twice a week interviews, 2 hours each session for us to get where I needed to go. And I got an Englishman who had taught 10 years at the University of Pittsburgh to be the ghostwriter, so he understood the both sides of my personality and both sides of the Atlantic. But initially, I would be the goal was each chapter is a different place:
Hmm.
Kansas, Massachusetts, Pittsburgh, Denver, New York, Atlanta, and then California for the time that I was commuting and working there, although not living there. Um, at least one thing I took away from each organization and typically took away from the boss,
Hmm.
and I've said for years when I worked for British Land and Motor Corporation, which is Austin Morris, Jag, Rolls-Royce, bodies we made, Rover, Triumph, etc. I worked for a boss who said, "Don't believe your own bullshit." And I've used that over and over and over again, and passed that on to students, passed it on to mentorees and staff, which again is a really good foundation and platform of a way to live.
Mm.
Is and one of the things not really mentioned in the book so much, but that I think is one of the biggest problems today is everybody takes themselves so seriously.
Hmm.
I think political correctness is essential in many applications in American society. It certainly has a role. I also think it has a problem in that it basically censors people for them to say how they really feel and think,
Hmm.
and and it puts a lid on at least the verbalization at times, which I'm not sure is healthy. And I think comedy through COVID, comedy got stifled, where a lot of people booed comedians because they would rag on everybody. And it's like, I'm English Irish. Tell me all the Irish jokes. And I suspect from the last name Dugan that you have Irish ethnicity
Hmm.
also.
Hmm.
So, tell me all the Irish jokes you like. I don't have any sensitivity. I mean, and I understand, and people don't understand. Why did Polish people get labeled, not smart? Well, because they couldn't speak English,
Hmm.
early on. So that was one of the problems. Why did the Irish people in my family, my great grandparents, coming to England, get labeled as being not smart? Well, because the government wouldn't allow the Catholics to go to high school,
Mm.
so, and they certainly didn't go to university, so they didn't get educated. So there were structural reasons for this. I mean, there's structural reasons why some of the racial prejudice that goes on in our country right now is because of the imbalance for many, not all, by any means, thank God, not for all, um, that they didn't get that chance to read and write and speak English and
Yeah.
do math at an early age, which is so critical.
Yeah. I think that personal responsibility for what we say, I think it needs to also be emphasized that, okay, I'm with you in terms of the whole issue of political correctness. However, I think that a better tact would be, before I say this, I might want to rethink how I'm going to say it so that I can express how I feel, but at the same time being sensitive too. And we don't stop and think. We just blurt it out, and that's when people take offense. By the same token, It's one of those things that I think that individuals who want to jump say, go to your thesaurus first. Try choosing different words, less attacking words, or make it, I am feeling blah, 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 because, as opposed to you make me feel, then you're not attacking them. You can still tell
Yeah.
people how you feel without attacking them. And I think that's something that we've lost. BernieJMullin.com is the website. Again, that is BernieJMullin.com. And the book is entitled Regaining America's Dream, Making It Attainable for All. I'm Richard Dugan, and you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. Dr. Bernie Mullin, I want to thank you so much for this extended conversation. This is very interesting stuff, and I know there's still more that we could converse about. And we've kept it, I actually do believe we've kept it apolitical, okay? And that's a good thing. I certainly have plenty to say on the subject, but I'm not going to go there because I've found that, especially when it comes to talk radio and television, I've never seen where name calling has really helped a situation. I've never seen it. And to the whole Palestinian Israeli thing, my position is they're both wrong. And they better get their act together. I know this has been going on for a couple thousand years. I get that. But you are not your ancestors. And there was a survey, Bernie, that I saw of young people, both in Israel and Palestine. This was years ago. They asked them about this conflict, like the Hatfields and McCoys conflict that's been going on for so many generations. And the young people back then said, we don't want any part of it. Mom, Dad, this is yours. This is not ours. We don't want any part of this. And apparently the parents didn't listen. But nonetheless, I think that that's the case in terms of whether it's work. Mom, Dad, that was your generation's, you want to be farmers. I want to be a dancer. I want to be an artist. I want to be a mathematician. I want, so on and so forth. We each need to be able to stand up and say, this is what I want for my life. And I think that's also part of reimagining America's dream. I have three final questions that I do want to ask you. But again, I thank you so much for giving us so much time.
Oh, thank you. Just to hitchhike on what you just said, Richard. The book is about understanding both poles and both extremes and coming together, united in the middle. One of the elements is we recently went to Costa Rica on vacation. They have an ethos called Pura Vida, which literally translated pure life. So if you go to Mexico and you say, gracias, they will say de nada. It's nothing. You're welcome. All right.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to Costa Rica, you say gracias, they'll say pura vida, having a pure life, having a good life.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to see in America us come back with a national ethos. And what I'm suggesting is we refer to each other as pal. So Richard, you're now my pal, and PAL stands for peace and love. And I taught at UMass in Amherst for years, and I taught marketing positioning. How do you position a product? Nike, just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Just do what? Just do whatever your itch is.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally personalized. It's totally customized. It's brilliant, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to teach that positioning concept, I would have a class of half women, half men, and graduates. Brilliant. I mean, Amherst College, Harvard, great students, right? And I would say, okay, pro-choice, pro-life, go at it for a 50-minute class. And they go at it and they get really, really in each other's faces, and it was nasty and all the rest of it. And about 5 minutes before the end, they go, okay, time out. Okay. And they'd say, well, Prof, what are you? And I'd say, I'm pro-choice and pro-life. And they'd say, you can't be. And I'd say, yes, you can. And that's the whole point of the class. Marketing has taught you to believe the two polar extremes, It's black and white, whereas most of the world is gray and somewhere in the middle. So let me tell you my approach. As a Catholic Christian, I am pro-life, believing life begins at conception. I understand that's not popular. I understand that's not practical, and it's not the government definition, which is life begins at sustainability outside the womb. Fully accepting of all of those perspectives. On the other hand, I understand that reproductive freedom for a woman, who am I to tell a woman what to do with their body? It's totally her choice. And by the way, biblically, God gave you the free will to do that. So as a Christian, I can live with that and accept that. So, basically, I know that's a little controversial, but the book basically states middle ground in the middle of, okay, your extreme MAGA agenda is this, your extreme woke agenda is that. That's not going to work. How about we stick to stuff where we can all agree? How do we get poor people not to be poor? How do we get people who are marginalized to be better educated? How do we give people the opportunity to come together, rich, poor, black, white, yellow, whatever, together and learn about each other, listen to understand, not listen so I can hear the faults in what you're saying and then attack you, but listen to understand your perspective.
Hence our theme song, Tell Me Your Stories. I'll do my best to understand. We are flesh and blood. And with that, I want to remind you and thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. following the news, streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com with podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. We are also on YouTube where you can watch these conversations. We hope you will subscribe and click notification so that when I post a new conversation, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in to 9 different conversations each week, 9 different conversations, 9 different guests, and we hope that you'll join us for each one of those. We also ask that if you can support the work we're doing here financially, we would be so gratefully appreciative. We thank those who have helped and those who will help. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are so grateful. PayPal is our source where we ask you to go to provide that support. And when they ask you for an email address, it's richard@richarddugan.com. That's richard@richarddugan.com. And also, spend some time during this decade of perfect vision going within to that quiet, peaceful, calm place and listen to your own still, small voice. And with all of that being said, my final 3 questions for our very special guest here on the program, author of Reimagining America's Dream. Who is Bernie Mullin?
I would like to think that I am a fiscal conservative with a warm heart and a big social conscience.
What gets you up in the morning?
Trying to make the world a better place immediately for my family and then for the community that I live in, which is 2 communities, Denver, Cherry Creek area of Denver, Colorado, and then Dillon, where I have a mountain home. What have I done to make the world a better place today?
And finally, what was your best day?
Oh, my best day was probably 1966, the English FA Cup final, Football Association Cup final. My team, Everton, beat Sheffield Wednesday to win the cup. I'd spent weeks and weeks trying to get tickets. My dad had tried everything. Finally, there was someone who was going to, a friend of my brother-in-law, his father, business associate, got tickets, and they mailed them from Leicester, England to Liverpool on the Friday for the cup final being on the Saturday. Dumb move. But they mailed them. They never arrived. My dad went to the bank, to what he called the ugly teller, the bank machine, got cash, and gave it to my brother-in-law, who drove me down to London, 3-hour drive. and we bought tickets from brokers, scalpers, or spivs, as they call them in England. And I ended up being in the Sheffield Wednesday fan section with my 6 foot wide blue banner, Everton on it. We were 2-0 down, and then we scored three and won the cup. So
Wow.
that was one of the greatest days of my life. I've had many of them, but that was one of the greatest days of my life. And as a reminder to all your listeners, Richard, first of all, thank you so much for having me on and this opportunity to go in so much depth. But the book is available on Amazon
Mhm.
and Barnes and Noble, as well as other sources. That's probably the quickest and easiest way to get it. Certainly, come on my website and you can see what kind of work I do to try and build better winning organizations, whether they're charitable organizations or whether they're for-profit businesses.
Mm. Well, again, we thank you so much for giving us so much time. And we also thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to love. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.